Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Definition, aka the guy who makes Chris Evans look like Chris Evans, and this video we're breaking down Snowpiercer. The TV adaptation is just about to drop, so there's never been a better time to revisit the movie and discuss all of the ins and outs of it. Throughout this video, we'll be breaking down the film's overall plot, its many messages, and the overall meaning to its ending. There will be heavy spoilers here, so if you haven't had a chance to check out the film yet and don't want anything ruined, then I highly recommend that you turn off now. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, as we're going to be doing breakdowns on the show episode by episode, and you don't want to miss any of the coverage. Anyway, with that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into our breakdown of Snowpiercer. Okay, so Snowpiercer is a high-concept post-apocalyptic film that not only talks about our society as a whole, but how human nature and greed often get in the way of doing the right thing. In the early 2000s, global warming was slowly starting to devastate the planet, and in an attempt to cool down the Earth, scientists launched rockets into the stratosphere. This backfired and created a frozen wasteland in 2014 that wiped out the majority of the species. Those that were able to bought or snuck their way onto a train built by a genius engineer known as Wilford. The train was built by the mechanical magnate to circulate the world until the ice had melted and humanity could venture back outside and try to rebuild civilization. In some ways, it's similar to Noah's Ark, and there are a lot of biblical metaphors laced throughout. Wilford in some ways is a god. He's referred to as malevolent, the children study him in school, and there's almost a cult-like worship of him. Wilford is also omnipresent throughout the train, almost able to see all, and he has created the ecosystem on board it, providing all those with food, water and life. Revolution is also a key word, as it not only highlights the movement that we follow on the train, but also the train itself. Each time it comes full circle, it's known as a revolution, and this is a nice tie back to the overall plot itself. We pick up with the train in 2031 and see the class structure that exists within it firsthand through the eyes of Curtis. Those in the tail of the train have had to resort to cannibalism, are punished for speaking up, and live day to day obsessed with surviving. Their arms are frozen and broken off as punishment, they're split apart from their families, and their children are abducted for a purpose which I'll get into later. They're also fed protein blocks, which we discover through the film are actually made out of insects, and if you are what you eat, then this definitely highlights how the people that exist within the tale are viewed. They're classed as freeloaders because they snuck onto the train, berated by political figures, and undervalued. However, we discover at the end of the film that they provide an essential service. The film carries the message that, in the face of inequality, all the lower class can do is revolt. It's something that definitely feels more relevant today, especially in the wake of lockdown, and we are often asked whether the economy is worth more than human life. It's something that this movie tackles with too, and it becomes clear throughout the film that those in the tale are merely kept alive in order to allow the rich to survive and keep the train moving. I'll get into this more as we go further into the video, but you quickly realise that the top 5 and 1% have basically imprisoned the lower class in a system that they aren't really able to rise up and escape from. There's a moment at the beginning in which a violin player is requested to go to the front, and I think this symbolises how those born poor often only manage to escape it through either theatrical talents or sport. It's very much a case of if you're unable to entertain, then you'll be stuck in a prison in which you are solely used as a commodity. After another devastating child abduction, Curtis's father figure Gilliam decides it's time to start a revolution. They decide that in order to control the train, they have to get control of the engine. Initially, there's a lot of fear surrounding this, and most just want to mind their own business, preferring to live day to day rather than sacrificing themselves for the greater good. I told you it was laced with social commentary. However, after they realise that the guards have no ammunition due to having to stop so many revolutions in the past, they decide to move forward. They free a prisoner known as Namgoong, a chronal addict that worked as a security specialist on the train before he was jailed. Chronal is actually a drug used to subdue prisoners on the train and put them into suspension, but it was modified for street use and passed down the tail. Namgoong becomes a great ally, and along with his clairvoyant daughter Yona, the rebels make their way up the train. Here they notice an iced over plane that is slightly visible, whereas the year prior it wasn't, and this shows that the ice is beginning to unthaw. You really get the feeling that Curtis is willing to do anything for his revolution, and he even sacrifices his friend Edgar in order to capture a high-ranking official known as Minister Mason. Curtis makes his way up the train with Mason, Namgung, Yona, Gray, Tanya and Andrew. The latter of the two had their children taken from them in the beginning, and their fate ties into the end. The movie is laced with incredible action scenes as the rebels make their way up the train, and we see lavish carriages such as a Garden of Eden-like greenhouse, an aquarium, classroom and more. The classroom is indoctrinating the children, and the teacher there attacks the rebels. In the tale, a staff member of Wilford known as Franco executes Gilliam, and angered by this, Curtis returns the favour by shooting Mason. The group go forward, but Franco catches up and shoots at them from the classroom. He stalks them and kills Tanya and Gray in a spar carriage, but Namgung fights with Franco and seemingly manages to kill him. Curtis promises to find Tanya's son Timmy, and they head upwards. It's here that we learn of Curtis's past and all the things that he's had to do to survive. It's revealed that the tailies resorted to cannibalism in order to get by, and that Curtis almost ate Edgar as a baby. Gilliam gave Curtis his arm instead, and thus he was able to live. I believe that this metaphorically shows that those in the 1% are willing to let those below fight amongst themselves and literally eat each other in order to take their eyes off who's really in power. They can't fight those at the top if they're fighting amongst themselves, and it definitely mirrors our society in several ways. It reminds me of how people often blame immigrants, those on benefits and the lower rungs of society for being the problem because that is what they're fed by the press. However, these groups often don't have any real power, and therefore we are pointing the blame in the wrong direction. After becoming cannibals, they were then given protein blocks in order to be thankful for the little crumbs that they had, whilst those further up the chain still lived their lavish lifestyles. The survivors reach the last car before the engine, which is sealed, but Namgung and Yona reveal that Chronol is an explosive, and just as they're about to blow open a hole to the outside, Wilford opens the door. Claude, one of Wilford's staff, shoots Namgung, and Curtis goes into the engine room to meet Wilford face to face. It's here that we get the big twist that really sends Curtis off the rails. I'm sorry, you know how to do a bad pun at least once. Anyway, the twist is that Gilliam was actually working with Wilford to cause the rebellion. This was in order to reduce the population in the tale. He had allowed them to become cannibals to weed them out and then allowed them to thrive once more. The revolution was once more a sacrifice in order to keep the ecosystem alive. Wilford enlisted Gilliam, but really he viewed him as replaceable as the rest of those in the tale. It's a middle management scenario in which Gilliam was given a tiny bit of power, but in the end he was just a puppet that suffered with the rest of them, believing he was better because he had some authority. Wilford argues that the people up top are in just as bad a position as those in the back, and that every aspect of society has its cons. At the end of the day, how good you have it though all depends on luck and privilege. Wilford then offers Curtis his position, allowing him to control the same system that he fought against. He paints out the portrait that there's no other way than what the system established, and that those must live in poverty in order to support the important people of the world. Curtis almost accepts this job until riots force Claude to check outside, and Yona overpowers her. Yona rushes into the engine room and reveals a floor panel that has Timmy within it. In order to keep the engine going, Wilford has really crossed the line. Children under 5 are small enough to fit into it, and they're used to keep the train going manually. Curtis rescues Timmy at the cost of his arm, but it's clear that the children there are very much brainwashed into believing Wilford's ideals. One sacrifices themselves in order to go into the reactor, and it shows that if you teach children from a young age that the system is supposed to be a certain way, that they will follow it forever. To me, this reflects how child labour is still used across the world, and we turn a blind eye to it because it's part of the industries that benefit us with material items. Apple, Samsung and more have all been exposed for using companies that thrive on child labour, but we still support them because of what they've given us to make our life easier. This is very much what Wilford represents. Outside, Namgung kills Franco and they explode the chronal on the door, which sets off an avalanche that derails the train. Namgung and Curtis shield Timmy and Yona from the explosion by wrapping themselves around them, and thus they're able to survive because they sacrifice themselves for the future ideals. Yona and Timmy are the only survivors of the wreckage, and they make their way outside. They don't instantly freeze and die, and they actually spot a polar bear, which shows that life has started to return to the planet. This means it may be possible for them to survive, but there's actually a lot more going on. To me, this is almost an Adam and Eve like metaphor, and they've gone forth into a new world in order to create it. To build a new way of doing things, they had to bring the old systems crashing down, and this required revolution, ousting those in power, and sacrifice. However, they were able to accomplish it. The train itself, in some ways, can be seen as a prison. Throughout the movie, those from the back move to the front, but ultimately they're still stuck inside a train. This is a metaphor for how people can progress in society, but ultimately they're still stuck inside it. The children on board are told that if they go outside they will die, but clearly this isn't the case, and we must question the things that we are taught and whether they're actually the truth or not. Though the future for the two initially seems bleak, director Bong Joon-ho confirmed that they do survive and go on to repopulate the human race. This shows us that there is hope, and though change initially seems scary, we can push ourselves through and make something out of it. Now, I don't know whether we should start by tearing everything down, but the last few months have really opened my eyes to how broken everything is. We are willing to sacrifice those that make up the majority in order to keep our systems in place, and it really makes you question whether it's all worth it. Economies bounce back, but as this film shows, human life, if wiped out, does not. We must truly find the value amongst ourselves rather than in the system, and that's why Snowpiercer still carries such a strong message. It's an incredible film that feels even more relevant today than it did with its release 7 years ago, and I really can't get over just how well made this movie is. I definitely recommend it before you watch the release of the show, and hopefully this video has given you a new appreciation for it. Obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Snowpiercer and what you took from the ending. Comment below and let us know, and I just want to give a huge shout out to Bind Gaming, who's helped us work on this video and has supported the channel for a long time now. Definitely go check out their channel, and if you want something else to watch after this, then make sure you check out our breakdown of all the theories that we have for Westworld Season 4, which is going to be linked at the end. If you want to support the channel from as little as 99 cents a month, then please click the join button below. We massively appreciate it, and as a thank you, you get access to content early. If you want to come chat to us after the show, either follow us at DefinitionYT or click the Discord link in the description below. Those are the best ways to keep up to date with heavy spoilers, so hopefully we see you over there very soon. This is a channel for people who are mad into movies, so if that's the kind of thing you like, hit subscribe. Huge thank you for taking the time to watch this. I've been Definition, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.